Uh, can you properly see me and hear me? My name is Nataliya Stryamets. I'm going to be a moderator of this event today. I'm warmly welcome you to our webinar. Our webinar is organized by IUFRO Task Force on Post-Conflict Landscape Restoration. And before we will start, I would like to tell you a bit what does IUFRO mean and what this research organization is doing. So basically, IUFRO is a network of the forest scientists, and it is one of the oldest and one of the biggest networks in the world. It has more than 15,000 researchers and 100 numbers of members from all over the 120 countries. And it is promoting the evidence-based solutions for sustainable forest management. Next slide, please. So what does IUFRO do? So it is a non-profit, non-governmental international network of forest scientists, and it has headquarters in Vienna, Austria. It is the global network for voluntary collaboration, and it is open for everyone who is interested and dedicated to forest research and forest product research and related disciplines. And next slide, please. So IUFRO really address the global urgent needs in the research of forest and forest-related issues. It also provides a diverse topics from with a variety of scientists, and as I told before, they are working on the voluntary basis. IUFRO address research needs and profits of members and stakeholders, including policy, decision makers, practitioners, and industry, and even the civil society. Next slide, please. It has the president, the vice president, and CEO, and they are based in Vienna, Austria. I won't read the names because I'm afraid to misspell them, but you can read on the web page of IUFRO about every one of them. Next slide, please. And to address the really urgent global issues, IUFRO has different divisions. So it has 9 divisions in forest ecology, silviculture, forest operations, forest products, social science, and policy. And it has a variety of research groups and more than 180 working parties. And to address cross-cutting and urgent global issues, IUFRO has different task forces. And what are the task forces? They are really the interdisciplinary platforms to bring together different experts from different countries to generate knowledge, but also to share the knowledge on various topics that are really key and really urgent issues. And it has different special programs and projects, especially for the young scientists and for youngsters. Next slide, please. So the task forces are established on the temporary basis to advance the interdisciplinary forest science cooperation. They are really focusing on really key issues with a strong interest to policy and the forest sector. And also they are developing the global collaboration and information sharing. This is one of the key tasks to develop really collaboration and to share the knowledge. They organize in different meetings, webinars, workshops, special issues for scientific journals, and many, many other activities. And they are non-voting members for the IUFRO board, but they are invited to attend the IUFRO annual board meeting. Next slide, please. And I'm warmly welcome you to our task force. It's number T49, and it is called Post-Conflict Forest Landscape Restoration. Many of our members are from Ukraine, but we are focusing not only for Ukrainian forest landscape restoration, but the general the post-conflict restoration of forests globally. Next slide, please. And the special task force of this is aiming to provide a high-quality, cutting-edge scientific knowledge and innovative solutions for understanding the threats to the impact on forest landscape in post-conflict setting, with the aim to support policymakers, decision-makers, and all relevant stakeholders. And if you want to become a IUFRO member, what does it brings to you? It really expands your network. It gets access to knowledge, to you are gaining visibility, you can make an impact, you can receive awards, and you can write better grants together with your colleagues. So it was a short introduction of what IUFRO is. Next slide. That's it. Yes, thank you. And today, our task force is having a series of webinars. And those webinars are really a platform to share the different knowledge, different experience, scientific thoughts and scientific insights on the post-conflict landscape restoration. And today's talk was a great pleasure. I'm inviting Timo Vuorisalo, and his topic is offering a valuable historical perspective on how armed conflicts can profoundly reshape the forest governance and forest management practice and the role of forests in the national recovery. Timo is a professor at the Department of Biology, University of Turku, Finland. He is an ecologist, but he is interested in environmental history, in particular the impact of warfare on the post-war reconstruction of the urban and natural environments. He has co-edited 3 books on the environmental history of warfare, one in Finnish, and it is called Ecology of War, and with co-authors 2 other books with international focus about the long shadows, the global environmental history of the Second World War, and the other one is Resilient City in World War II. So warm welcome, Timo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nataliya. And I will try to find my own talk. It's here. And I hope you can also see it. Yeah, thank you, Nataliya. And thanks, Marina, also for inviting me to this webinar series. Yeah, my topic is impacts of World War II on Finnish forestry and forest policy. So in a way, I'm looking back in my presentation towards history that is now about 80 years old. But I still think that the experiences and forest policies of Finland during the Second World War, and maybe especially in the reconstruction period afterwards, may be helpful in understanding some of the global forest-related phenomena today. Some background first. I'm quite convinced that people are not very familiar with the Finnish military history. Finland participated in the Second World War in 3 successive conflicts. They all were part of the Second World War, and the first has been called the Winter War. It started in early December 1939, and the armistice was done in the 13th of March 1940. Then there was a period, little more than a year, when we lived in peace, and then we participated in the so-called continuation war, and maybe I regret to say it, but we were allies of the Nazi Germany. And that war started 4 years. And during the continuation war, the Finnish troops conquered areas in eastern Karelia. Karelia is a land area between Finland and Russia. At the time, it was, of course, Soviet Union. And that continuation war ended in 1944, late summer. And after that, because we had a peace treaty with the Soviet Union. Finland had to change its policy totally, and then the so-called Lapland War was done in order to expel the German troops from Lapland. And this war ended in 1945. And actually, this photo here is from the moment when the last of the German troops were expelled from Finnish territory. The scenery is in the Enontekiö, Lapland, and the Finnish flag is again there flying. So I think this was the last day of the conflict in the Lapland War. So Finland was part of the arena of the Second World War in Northern Europe, and a very active one actually, but in 3 successive periods. And I have to refer to these periods a little bit in my talk. So, some background information. People in Finland say that our forest resources have been studied maybe longer and in more detail than in most of the other countries in the world. But of course, this may just be that we want to boost our own status. Who knows? But anyway, the forest resources in the country have been systematically monitored since 1921. And it used to be done so that so-called line transects were covering the whole country, and forest experts and also biologists were walking there in the forest, basically thousands of kilometers, and making notes on the tree volumes and vegetation and so on. And this rather big task was repeated approximately in 10-year intervals. Now, for a couple of decades, the system has been done differently. There's a very high number of permanent study plots around the country, and these are monitored, some of them continuously. And anyway, we have a very comprehensive data on the forest resources, forest tree compositions, and also quite a high number of biological parameters from the whole territory of Finland. And now the data is 100 years old. Today, about 100 or even more parameters are being measured in the permanent study plots throughout the country. Last year's summary result was that the total harvest in Finland was 74.3 million cubic meters, and of the harvested wood material, timber, the great majority went to industry. But as we all know, due to climate change, bioenergy is increasing in importance, and so 15% was used as an energy source for the Finnish in last year. So, quite careful forest monitoring for 100 years. The history of forest consumption in Finland has been rather gloomy from the perspective of forest resources. Finns have always been forest people. Still today, 75% of the land is covered by forest, but it doesn't mean that we have in the past used forests in any sustainable way. For instance, slash and burn agriculture has been very common throughout the country. I think the last piece of legislation related to it is from the year 1928. And as we all know, slash and burn agriculture is very, very much wood wasting stuff. Basically, the forest is burnt and then taken into cultivation. The government of Sweden, Finland was for a long time an eastern province in the Kingdom of Sweden, and the crown was very, very hostile towards this ancient way of using forest resources. So, especially in the eastern Finland, slash and burn agriculture has been very prevailing mode of forest use. The black and white photo from the western part of the country from the 19th century, and it shows a tar production area. Young pines are partially peeled, and they are then producing resin on the trunk, and after a few years time, you can make tar from these tree bottoms. At some point in history, Finland was one of the greatest exporters of tar in the world. Tar was used in old wooden ships, for instance. But for most part of our history, wood has been our main energy source. Still in the year 19, sorry, in the year 1800, about half of the wood harvested in Finland was burnt in households for heating and cooking and so on. And wood energy, or firewood, how you may call it, it was for much longer than many other industrial countries of great importance in Finland. It was not until the year 1960 when the three main fossil fuels together, coal, oil, and gas, when these three fossil fuels together were bigger than wood as an energy source. So Finland has been for a very, very long time relying on wood as an energy source. Then, of course, we have had this fossil period, but now politically and for climate reasons, again, wood is making a kind of comeback. Not as in maybe as in as big magnitude, but anyway. The map on the right shows areas in Finland in the mid-1800s that were suffering from shortage of wood. And you see in the east there are some red and orange areas, and these were the slash and burn areas where forest cover was practically missing from some municipalities. In the west coast you see also red areas, and these were probably tar production areas where pine forests disappeared almost totally in some hectic periods of the tar production era. So the history has been rather wasteful as regards forest resources. Then a little bit of statistics and how things have changed. The domestic roundwood consumption in millions of cubic meters is now, it has been in recent decades much different than it was at the onset of the Second World War. In 1938, a year before the onset of the Second World War, wood fuel was almost as big usage of forest as was industry. And the industry was mainly wood pulp factories and also sawmills. Exports were very small then. Nowadays, of course, as you see, this is not nowadays, but recent history in 1995, about 90% of roundwood has gone into the industries, and wood fuel importance has been very low. Now, actually, it is bigger again. So here is a graph that starts from the 1920s when the Finnish national monitoring of forest resources started. And now we are talking about the Second World War. So please have a look in the year 1940. There on the bottom left, the third year. And you see from 1940 to 1945, actually forest growth was bigger than removal. But which is of course interesting, because what I'm going to say very, very soon is that wood was actually extremely important in Finland during the Second World War. But anyway, based on the forest statistics, growth surpassed the consumption, also during the war years. Okay, now to the topic, World War II. Okay, in a way, I'm now repeating what I just said. This graph is rather small, but I hope you can see the space heating is there on the lowest component of the columns, and it just means heating of households and industries and so on. And you see here there in the 1800, as I said, about one half of the all harvested wood was used for heating. But it was almost the same still in 1940, as you see. But forest use, of course, had expanded, and industry, transports, and so on had become also of major importance. Okay. So, while in many other European countries, industrial revolution and industrialization was based on use of hydropower and fossil fuels, it was in Finland for a very long time based on renewable indigenous energy, wood and hydropower. And Finland, although we were for a very long time a very agricultural country, industrialization started already in the late 1800s, and from 1860 to 1900, the energy use of wood increased fivefold in Finland. And as we just saw in this previous graph, also in the year 1940, still space heating was the biggest single use of forest resources. But when the Winter War started in early December 1939, our country was in a situation where we in fact did have a storage of wood. It had been collected by the Finnish forest industries for industrial use and maybe exports. But what happened when the warfare started was that this industrial wood storage that actually was enough for 2 years of normal use. It had to be used during the winter war period for households and so on for heating, and that in very practical ways. So during the Winter War 1939 to spring 1940, we didn't have wood shortage yet because this storage collected by the industries was just enough that we could manage the 4-month war period. But what it says here, consumption of wood-derived energy peaked during the Second World War as wood had to replace imported fossil fuels. This was very true. When the Winter War started in December 1939, imports were practically cut. And just before the war, 40% of Finnish energy was imported. And this 40% was cut into practically zero, and this loss had to be replaced by increased use of wood. And it was possible because of this storage that we had. But it was only enough for the Winter War, 3 or 4 months. And one reason why wood energy became so important in Finland was the fact that there were 3 successive winters in the Second World War that were the coldest and also driest in the 1900s. And because it was extremely cold, below -30 for much of the time, a lot of wood fuel was needed just for heating premises. There were, however, other factors that increased use of wood as energy source during the Second World War in Finland, and one was the fact that these 3 extremely cold winters were also extremely dry. So there was very little snowfall. And that was, for that reason, the hydropower plants didn't produce much electricity. So hydropower wasn't of great help in those 3 winters. Fortunately, in Finland, traffic could continue. Our trains during the Second World War could use wood as fuel, and that was also the case for the automobiles. In cars, charcoal replaced gasoline, and charcoal was done domestically, of course. So the Winter War we survived and managed rather well with the stored wood resources. But when the continuation war started, Finland was forced to very quickly increase use of wood resources and forests. In the end, Finland lost 30% of its forest area to the Soviet Union, and this was after 1945. We lost 11% of the annual forest growth, and also many sawmills and as well as pulp and paper mills. And in the industrial side, our greatest industrial loss was the Enso Goodsite wood pulp factory just beyond the border, the current border. This Enso Goodsite wood pulp factory was so big that its output was greater than that of all of Soviet Union's pulp factories combined. We still have actually that company in our present territory acting in Finland. Its name has, however, changed. But so Finland lost a lot of forest resources after the war. Here is a picture showing charcoal burning in front line. The person here is having a pipe there, and then he has some wood there hidden in that heap of stuff. And when the wood stuff is there burnt in low oxygen availability, you will get charcoal as an end result, and that could be in the wartime used in the automobiles. Okay. Finland was the front line in Finland was in the eastern border between Finland and Soviet Union, and the sceneries were rather harsh. In the Finnish military history, the so-called Kolla battle is famous. The battle was done during the Winter War. It started almost immediately at the onset of the Winter War on the 7th of December, and it was still continuing at the 13th of March 1940 when the peace was achieved. So during the whole Winter War, fighting was going on in Kolla. The site is located near the Lake Ladoga in the former Suistamo municipality. There is a so-called Kolla River. The military part is not so interesting here, but in a way, it is maybe fair to say that the Finns survived the battle anyway. It was heavy, and it is very famous in the military history. But this shows what the Kolla battlefield looked after artillery attacks and so on. You see dying or dead tree trunks and so on. And of course, in the war, big areas of forest are burnt. Also, burning of forest can be a military tactic. This is a picture from the Kolla battlefield again, and you see a tank there on the left. The trees have been clearly suffering. Here is a detail. This is so-called Rangers Lodge in Kolla, just before the battle, and then on the below you see it afterwards. So great devastation of the scenery. But these pictures have been taken at the same spot. The left one is after the Battle of Kolla, and the right one is in the Russian side nowadays, actually, in 1995. So the forests have been recovered. It has been estimated that during the Second World War, the war activities concretely destroyed 2,021,000 hectares of forest, mainly in eastern and southeastern Finland. And for a long time, near the battlefields, there were bullets and whatever in the wood material, and that of course made all forestry practices very difficult. But forest regeneration, of course, took place eventually. So, something about the forests in post-war Finland. And yeah, as I said, the reconstruction period has been very important in the Finnish forest policy. And after the war, the greatest forest damages were in southeast Finland and in the Hanko Peninsula also. And okay, before I go to the next details in this slide, it is necessary to tell that because the demand for wood fuel increased very dramatically during the continuation war and so on, in 1943, a new law was passed in Finland, and it was about how to manage low productivity forest areas. Traditionally, the forest areas had been managed rather poorly, so that the landowners went to the forest and took the best trees away when they were of a certain height, and then used as timber and or whatever. And as a result of this, many forest areas were in a very poor condition. And in 1943, the forestry professionals in Finland realized that, okay, this is actually an opportunity to get rid of these low-quality forests. And they passed a law that gave tax exemptions to landowners who allowed their forest areas to be clear-cut and planted artificially with tree saplings. And we can say that this year 1943 was the start of modern effective forest management in Finland. And the clear cutting that had been almost unknown in the country started to be supported by the government in that year. And when the war ended, a lot of wood was required and needed. Finland was able to maintain independence, but we had to pay war reparations to Soviet Union. In Finnish, that is sotakorvaus. And part of it, not very high part, but about 18% was in forest products. We also needed a lot of wood material and timber for reconstruction. And also we had internal immigrants from the areas that were ceded to Soviet Union. About 20% of the Finns had to be accommodated in the smaller country that was left after the war. And the shortage of imported energy continued after the war, and so-called emergency forest loggings had to be done. For instance, in Helsinki, the target was 3 million cubic meters for the year 1945 alone. And this wood was basically needed for indoor heating. And the local inhabitants had to do half a million cubic meters by themselves. Okay, in the post-war years, technologies improved, horses were gradually replaced by tractors and so on. This is actually the methodological productivity increase. So in this graph you can, these are cubic meters and so on. You can see how much more effective machinery is compared to a traditional horse. I said a few minutes ago that in 1943 a law was passed so that the government gave tax exemptions to those forest owners who accepted clear cutting and forest cultivation or artificial regeneration. 3 years after the war, the so-called forestry declaration in Finnish, it was Harsintajulistus or something like that, was published. It was not an official document, it was a kind of pamphlet by 6 leading forestry experts in Finland. One of them was Professor Heikinheimo. And they declared that time had come to totally stop the traditional forest uses. The so-called diameter limit cutting practices are unnatural and uneconomical. And they called for rapid modernization of forestry practices, and clear cuttings became the norm in Finland. And the result has been quite predictable, increased productivity. You see here, if you look at the time scale, starting from 1950s and 1960s, the growth that is here in red color has been much bigger than harvest in the Finnish forests. But still, both have increased. So this graph very simply shows how much efficacy has increased in the Finnish forest policy. So in a way, this whole trend has been boosted by the Second World War and the acute shortage of wood that forced in 1943 to make this law that started to support clear cuttings and so on. And it was then further supported by this 1948 Declaration of Forest Policy. So Finnish forest policy has been very modern in the sense of productivity. And here you see how the modern forest areas may look. Well, you are forestry people, you know what this means, but anyway, for all forest parcels have their own plan or how they are going to be treated. And on the right-hand side, you see how conditions are being improved for tree saplings. So, at the same time as forestry has become more modern and more effective, it has also resulted that forest structures have become more homogeneous. And for the forest biological diversity, this has been bad news. The first national report on endangered species that was really comprehensive was published in 1986 in Finland, and it has been repeated also at the interval of 10 years approximately, and about 1/3 of our red list species are forest specialists in old growth forests and some high quality deciduous forest areas. And as we all know, habitat change is the biggest cause of extinctions in the world. In Finland, these extremely effective forestry practices have resulted in poor biological diversity in the forest areas. Our forests are very effectively managed, but they are rather homogeneous. They are of the same age. There is not very much of decaying wood, and so on. So, to summarize this presentation, historical development of Finnish forest resources is very well documented. World War II made Finland very much a wood-dependent economy in the energy sector, and the forest use increased dramatically. And the post-war fuel wood crisis resulted in emergency loggings and a very deliberate change in our forest policy. And since the year 1948, the increasingly effective forestry practices have greatly increased productivity, but resulting in biodiversity decline. So, to summarize very briefly, our forests are used very effectively, but as a matter of fact, the rather poor biodiversity of Finnish forests is actually stemming back to the practices adopted during the Second World War and strengthened during the reconstruction period. So, thank you for your attention, and if there is time, I would be happy to answer some questions.
Thank you so
wonder
much.
whether should I stop sharing? Yeah.
Yeah, you can stop sharing. Thank you so much for such an interesting talk. And I will open the floor for the discussion, and we have plenty of time for the questions. And being a moderator, at least one positive side, I can ask the first question and don't wait for too long to ask the question. So, Timo, please tell me, what lesson can we learn from the history for our post-war landscape restoration, for example, for Ukrainian case? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I was actually expecting this question because, of course, my view was 80 years back in time. Well, I'm not very well aware of what kind of forest policy changes the ongoing war has resulted in Ukraine, but I think the lesson is that any kind of military conflict that is taking place in forested areas, it is going to affect the forests greatly. And as we saw from the battlefield pictures, the forests were dying. And it will take decades from them to recover. It will happen, however, but as you saw, the forest looked like a natural forest in 1995, 50 years, more than 50 years after the battle. So it will take decades. And there are then, of course, technological problems also, because the tree trunks are full of war material, bullets and whatever, and they cannot be used properly. Maybe the lesson that I have in my mind is that the forestry practices may have long-standing, the wartime forestry practices may have long-standing impacts for decades in the future. I personally see World War II as the main cause of our extremely intensified forestry during the reconstruction period. Finland doesn't have fossil fuels at all, and so wood fuel has been always very important. But it is hard to generalize more than by saying that it will depend on the particular country and what have been the uses of the forests and how these uses are going to change after the conflict. It may be different in Ukraine than in Finland, but I'm sure there are going to be some changes.
Okay, thank you so much for such a Good answer. Does anyone has a question? Please raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask the question. Or if you have a low internet connection, you can write it in the chat and I will read it. So, do we have?
It is also possible that you send me by email questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
John is keeping his hand.
Yes, John, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Timo, thank you for a very, very interesting and very well organized and well presented talk. It's quite a history. And one of the things that occurred to me after the war, there was obviously very drastic change in policy and forest management practices. At the time, in the late 40s, was there any discussion? Was there much debate about this fairly dramatic change? I would think there would be many citizens and people who depended on the forest for other uses that may have been adversely affected by all this. If you could comment on that.
Yeah, thank you. That was a very good question. Finland has always been a democratic country, and there was no, well, during the war there was of course censorship also, so it was not possible to say everything. But after the war, well, Finns are very good at debating all the time. So there were hot debates. My own background is such that I'm more aware of the conservation-related debates. And I would say that the atmosphere in the country was very patriotic in the first reconstruction years. And even nature conservation people understood that of course, we have to get more timber out of the forests because we have to pay the for reparations and reconstruct the country and so on. So I would say that the critique was not very intensive, but it did exist, and people had a freedom of speech. They could say what they thought, but the forest historians seem to emphasize that it was this 1943 law that provided tax exemptions to the landowners if they changed their forestry practices. And I forgot to say, but this tax exemption was continued after the war for some time at least. And it was an economic incentive, and therefore people accepted it more or less. Yeah. So there was no great opposition, I would say.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And Ruslan, your turn, please.
Yeah, thank you, Timo. Yeah, I must say I have some background in Finland, so there's some question which I'm located in the South Finland right now currently, and correct me if I'm wrong, that because of all this changes in demand for resources, also for people who are relocated inside the country, and there was demand on the food. And is it so that I see some parallels with Ukraine, where like during the reconstruction, the forest will be needed also apparently for some infrastructure projects, and also lands will be needed because of new industries will be built. But in Finland, is it so that there was also demand in food production, especially in the south parts, and the forests partly was converted, or was it so like after the war that some parts of the forest were converted to agriculture?
Well, thank you, Ruslan. There was no hunger in Finland, but people old people still remember that there were so-called special years when, for instance, you could buy only a certain amount of butter when you went to the shop. So in Finnish, the saying was that oli kortilla. You must had a card to show that you had a permit to buy, let's say, half a kilo of sugar or butter or so. But there was no real hunger. But yes, the answer is yes, because several 100,000 people emigrated from those parts of Finland that were ceded to Soviet Union. And there was a law that the big farms had to give away some part of their land to these people who were migrants from the war area, and they lost those territories. Actually, I have to say that my father was one of those guys. He was an immigrant from Viipuri. And so I would say that yes, because most of the people were farmers and they needed land, and therefore after the war, quite a lot of forest area was also cut for agricultural purposes. And so it was quite necessary for a couple of decades, but starting from the late 1960s and more in 1970s, when the first generation of these settlers in the remaining part of the country, when they have lived there for one generation, their kids actually didn't want to live in the countryside anymore. Finland started to urbanize, and I think a couple of 100,000 people moved to Sweden. And so, in fact, the forest area started to grow again because some older farmlands were not anymore needed for agriculture starting from 1960s and 70s. In Finland, we talk about pakettipelto, parcel fields, so that the new generation didn't want anymore continue this small farm business, and it was also not as economical as were the bigger farms. And so there was this, in a way, 1 or 2 generation problem with the immigrants from those parts of country that had been living in the areas that were lost to Soviet Union, but things changed in 3 decades again. But for some time, land was needed for food production. That's clear.
Okay, thank you so much. Do we have other question? While we are waiting, I would like to ask another question. So, have you studied or have you any thoughts about how forests influence the well-being of Finnish people after the war? Because in Ukraine, it's quite a big issue right now. Mm-hmm.
Well, the answer is that forest areas in Finland have been and still are a very big issue for the Finnish welfare, and we have very good environmental psychology groups, and in Joensuu University nowadays, Eastern Finnish University, they have been studying the health effects of forest environments for the mental well-being of people and so on. Yes, forest has been and is still and will be, I guess, very important to Finns. However, there is a unlimited amount of folk tales related to forest areas, and most Finns like to be in forest, and one reason is that we have in Finland you have a right to pick berries and mushrooms practically on anyone's land. So although the land is privately owned, you can still hike there, you can pick berries and so on. You cannot do for forestry in others' land, but this small scale activity is possible. I know that some people are now concerned that in metropolitan Helsinki there are some young people who are afraid to go into the forest, but this is something that we have not experienced earlier. And we are very amazed.
Okay, thank you. Marina, please.
It's not a question, it's more rather maybe discussion, but also information. First, Timo, thanks a lot for giving such informative and nice talk. And we are prepared, we are working on a special issue of sustainability science. So maybe, if you have, and the deadline is 1st of June, but hopefully we could prolong it somehow. If you have any, and it's on post-conflict forest landscape restoration, yeah. And we really need this kind of historical.
June is rather soon, really.
Yeah, but we could prolong it if it's needed, because there are several other contributors. They need extension, because we need this historical perspective. It would be good to have this paper that bringing this historical perspective on. And about the situation in Ukraine now, because I have a project, Nataliya is involved in this project, funded by Formas, by Swedish Research Council, and we are working with civic ecology practices, but we also some kind of interview people from civic sector, many NGOs that are extremely active, and there is one a term which is discussed and or concept is a blind reconstruction, which is sort of a way, and I really want us across in IUFRO, and you are very welcome to write a paper about this blind reconstruction, because it's a way when you focus on forest landscape restoration as it could be done in normal condition, when there are institutions are stable, when the tenure not change, and also when in Ukraine, there are many discussions that because this high pressure from the government that focus on rapid and fast reconstruction after the war, then the economic interest in using forest would be very intensive, very high, and that might change and affect how forest is used. But at the same time, there are many triggers in Ukraine, or maybe other powers that balance this governmental sort of interest. We have many civic NGOs that are extremely active, and they really mobilize, and they are sort of create sort of many networks across all NGOs just to prevent this powerful move from the government, which is extremely important. And also there is FSC certification, which also a trigger that could sort of protect sort of how do you think, would it be possible? I mean, consider the new context which exists now in Ukraine. Even if the war is extremely heavy, it's much more heavy than it was during the Second World War. The effect on force is extremely high. Do you think that this kind of active civil society sector and also really democratic discussion in Ukraine, there is really hard to prevent any thoughts, any ideas. It's really very
That sounds good.
yeah, it's very open space for discussion.
Yeah.
And also FSC certification. Would it be possible to really balance this sort of strong governmental interest in economic use of forest, or intensify use of forest resources after the war?
Well, if I knew the answer, I would probably be the forest minister in Ukraine. So, thank you for the very difficult question. I think anything is possible, but you have to find a balance, because, of course, the government should have some own targets and aims. But I'm very glad to hear that the civic society is strong and all opinions are allowed and so on. In Finland, in the last decades, it was the habit of establish so-called parliamentary preparation groups that included both politicians and volunteers, maybe NGOs participating, and so on. And these parliamentary groups, they gathered together, and there was very often a very high diversity of opinions. But they almost, I think, practically always they ended up with some kind of report. Of course, there were in the end some differing opinions there listed, but I would strongly think that some kind of parliamentary system, it could combine the civic society and the governmental approaches. There were so-called parliamentary committees, and they had both politicians and government officials, and then NGOs and so on participating. I think this kind of fora could be places where open discussion and from many stakeholder groups could be included.
Thank you. And if you're interested to join, I don't know if that happens, but I would like, we will have a meeting tomorrow of our task force. You're very welcome to become a member if you're interested. But
Thank you.
It's absolutely voluntary. Nothing, you don't have to do anything, just to participate and provide your opinion. But we would like to write a paper jointly on this blind reconstruction, actually, and bring all ideas about this blind reconstruction from different contexts, really to bring that idea that after the war, the reconstruction should be completely different, done completely different because it has changed. And in order to avoid mistakes that have been done, maybe in other countries, we might propose some sort of guidelines how it could be done. Yeah.
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 Thank you. If you could send me some information, that would be
Yeah.
very, very nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
But yeah, I think that every country is its own case, and we know what happened in Finland, and the government action was very effective. But basically, it was the forest experts who actually were there all the time behind, especially this Professor Heikin Heimo, one person. He was very influential. He was a professor of forest economy, I think, and he was behind both this law of 1943 and behind this forest use declaration in 1948. So there can be, so I would say that in Finland it was expert initiated, but then the government took the message and implemented the laws and so on. But there are other ways of doing it, of course. And I think some kind of parliamentary system would be better.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Do you have any other questions? You can write it in the chat or you can raise your hand and put it.
Also email to me is possible.
Yeah, and also email. We will have the recording of this webinar available. So if you want, you can watch it one more time. Yeah.
And also we will provide the summary of this webinar. It will be also in a written form on our page within the IUFRO website.
Thank you so much, Timo, and thank you everyone for joining us. And follow us on the social media, and you can also join for our next webinars.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to participate.
Thank you.
Okay. See you.
See you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye
Have a
bye.
nice day. Bye.